So, what's the worst display of incompetence you've ever witnessed? Story number 1. I was working for a small magazine in college. At the time, I was a lower-level section editor and was finishing up an article on Black Hippy, Kendrick Lamar's rap group. I was in the View section, and the article was for the same section. However, it didn't have enough opinion in it, so I had to keep editing it. Edits were getting sloppy because I was exhausted and sent one draft back with things in parentheses instead of a diff color, and it read like Kendrick Lamar will undoubtedly be one of the most influential rappers of our age. Is this enough of an opinion? I mean, I'm trying to add a viewpoint wherever I can and am getting really exhausted, and we need to move on to the other articles. Editor-in-Chief replied back yes, and I said awesome. The day of print I go and look at my article, and there's my fucking comment with the parentheses stuff still there. Story number 2. Probably Slingshot Tim, a guy I used to work with, who managed to slingshot himself into an office table during a meeting. Tim was the definition of an unnecessary hire. His dad was one of our most important suppliers at the time, so the boss was forced to hire him for a job he basically couldn't do, but also couldn't ever really be fired for. It was the moron's sweet spot. During one meeting with Tim, I saw him lean really far back in his chair during a meeting, far enough back that the chair started to creak loudly. So far so standard, but Tim had done this maneuver without turning the little knob thing under the chair to give himself a little slack, so he had to push really hard against the base of the table to stay in his casual position. It looked like a surprising amount of effort. Tim was visibly sweating to stay cool. Eventually, Tim couldn't take it anymore and ended up slipping about 2/3 of the way into the meeting. Thanks to physics, the lack of tension shot his chair forward, throwing him into the conference table. He took the entire desk to the chest, shaking the projector enough to unplug it from the wall, and spilling more than a few cups of coffee. It was the most hilariously loud and stupid thing I've ever seen in a meeting. Even people walking by the conference room completely stopped to witness this grown man turn himself into a human catapult. He picked himself up off the floor in a daze, then started hurriedly packing up his stuff amidst uproarious laughter, and ran out of the room. I'm not sure if Tim still works there, but I'm definitely sure the legend of Slingshot Tim endures to this day. Story number 3. I was working with an older transportation engineer at work. The guy had literally designed hundreds of miles of highways, interchanges, and roadways. He was helping to write a 100-page document that I was an editor on. He took the document without speaking to any other member of the team and sent it out to 20 different people for their input without track changes on it. He said he thought that if he didn't change the name of the document, that it would just automatically update on our server when they make changes to. In the end, I ended up with more than 25 versions of it that I was checking line by line for changes at all hours of the night because it was due in several days and some of the changes conflicted. I explained the whole issue to him once I was finished fixing it all, but he did it again on another, smaller document a month later. Then he retired suddenly. I think that they asked him to leave because his skills stopped developing in the 1970s and because he stole food from work all the time, even though he was rich. Don't miss him one bit. Story number 4. I was at a Subway and the person in front of me asked for a BLT. The employee just stared blankly until the customer said, "Bacon, lettuce, and tomato." The girl then grabbed some bacon and put it on the bread, but then just stared blankly again until the customer said, "Lettuce." After putting lettuce on the bread, the customer got a blank stare until saying, "Tomato." To this day, it's the dumbest employee I've ever seen. Story number 5. We have this chemical we have to inject in our process to make sure solids don't come out of the liquid. We'd have been warning this particular customer for months that the level of this chemical was low and dropping, and they better add some stat. Instead, they decide to use the Kramer approach and push it to the last drop. Now they have solids in all their tanks and pumps, causing them to have to shut down and clean out every piece of equipment manually and losing production for about a week. That's a couple of $1 million down the drain. Good jobs, guys. Story number 6. Oh, there's a lot, but one of them sticks out. For my job, I work with a lot of files and storing them. This one lady didn't quite get how that was done, so she put a bunch of files in a box and then wrote down the identifying number for each of those files on a piece of paper. So then I get to the office and I'm handed a stack of 20 boxes and a stack of 20 sheets of paper, with no way of telling which box corresponded to which piece of paper. We store thousands of boxes of files. No amount of explaining could get this woman to understand that we don't go dig through every one of those boxes every time someone needs a file back. Story number 7. I was doing contract work in Miami for a drug company making a product containing nitroglycerin. They had a chemist who I thought did some odd things, but one fine day we had a meeting across town with him in it. It was a planned meeting. The subject material was known to all days before it. During this meeting, the good doctor gets up to make some point. This prompted him to start drawing a stick figure of nitroglycerin on the whiteboard. He drew 3 carbons. So far, so good. And then another, and finally a 5th. I looked at my boss. I'm an engineer, physicist by degree, and he saw it too. Nitroglycerin doesn't have 5 carbon atoms in it. It has 3. While this might be a little nitpicky, this guy was the chemist for this plant, and nitroglycerin delivery was the entire point of the product. I checked everything I saw from him. After that, lest it become my mistake. Story number 8. This story doesn't end with someone almost dying or anything, but it was the moment where I realized just how incompetent the company's middle management was. I work for a luxury retail company. My manager had been having issues getting into the hiring system to post job openings and push through resumes. He hadn't had access to it since he was hired for whatever reason. He had been trying to sort it out for months because school was starting up again, and he knew he needed more staff. He had been in an exchange with the person in charge of hiring, and he kept explaining he didn't have access to the system. All the person had to do was email him a link to reset the password, and he was golden. He gets an email saying that she will put it on her list of things to do today. She sent him an email saying she would send him an email with the link, which she could have sent him the link immediately. We still don't have access to the hiring system, and it's been a month. Story number 9. I work as an ambulance dispatcher. This chick got a promotion she didn't deserve, and she was primary dispatcher one day. Had a unit going to a standby when they came up closer for a cardiac arrest. As in, someone is dead, they need help immediately. The unit going to the standby, with no patients, was about 7 minutes closer than the unit she assigned. I let her know. She acknowledged me and promptly left things the way they were. I wonder if the cardiac arrest would have had a better outcome if she hadn't been so incompetent and switched the units. My supervisor told me to deal with it because she was promoted over me. Story number 10. I worked at an assisted living facility. There were outlets that had red covers. They were red because it signified that the outlet was hooked up to the generator. This was for the many patients who were hooked up to machines that they needed to continue living. So if the power went out, they would not die. Place gets repainted, so all the outlet covers are removed. See where this is headed. No one pays any attention to the color coding, and the red covers get put all over just willy-nilly. Wasn't until many months later, when a huge storm took the power out for days, that anyone realized this grave mistake. Fortunately, no lives were lost. Story number 11. The blowhard consultant the home office had sent us, with some good news, some bad. In his pep talk about the good news, he kept trotting out his deep understanding of business by using words like synergies and core competencies. It was unbelievable bullshit babble. People were rolling their eyes. Even the boss couldn't hide his disgust. Then the consultant got to the bad news. Some jobs would be lost through nutrition. The boss asked him if he meant attrition. No, nutrition. Oh, what? You're going to starve us. Howls of laughter, everyone looking around. That was it. The boss ended the meeting right there, visibly furious. I never saw a consultant again. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.